Hey guys, welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be taking a look at Tamiya's 1/48 scale P-38J Lightning. I took it upon myself to buy some aftermarket as well for this kit, so lots to look forward to and I hope you enjoy. So to get this build on the way, I initially de-sprued all of the cockpit parts, and then what I did is got the first bit of aftermarket out, and that is going to be Quinta Studio's cockpit detail set. These are 3D printed decals with exceptional detail on them. However, the only sacrifice you do have to make is the present raised detail on the parts. Using a scalpel and also some sanding sticks, I shaved and also sanded off any of the detail to kind of make all of the parts naked. Whilst I was in a little bit of a destructive mood, I took it upon myself to enhance some of the details. And to do this, I'm going to be using a micro drill bit and also a Dremel and drilling out any of the holes. This just makes the rudder pedals look that a little bit more in scale. With all of the parts now off the sprue and de-detailed, everything can receive a generous coating of Mr. Finishing Surfaces of 1500 Black. This gave me a very nice smooth base end to put the first colour onto this build, and that is going to be Mr. Color's C351 Zinc Chromate. And you might be able to see that I'm applying the paint in a very specific way, and this is called black basing. What black basing does is it naturally highlights certain regions of the cockpit or the place where you are spraying and leaves the more recessed areas more shadowed and darker. This just gives a more natural and interesting layer of a uniform paint. To finish off the general painting for the cockpit, I'm going to take out a paintbrush and just block in certain areas in black, very simply. Now I can use the Quinta Studio detail. These are very simple to use. All you need to do is pretty much cut out the decal which you're going to use, dunk it in water for just a few seconds to release it from the backing paper, and then slide it onto the model. Usually using ultra glue or PVA is the best way to be able to get them to stick down securely. To enhance the detail even more, I'm also going to be using an Edward Look control panel. This is my first time using them and I'm incredibly impressed. The detail is extraordinary. Now I wanted to give everything a uniform coat of VMS's satin varnish as everything had different sheens to it. Then it could receive Mr. Color's ground brown wash in certain recessed details. I didn't want to go too over the top here as I wanted to be reserved and not overwhelm any of the details present in the cockpit. The cockpit gets one final varnish now, this time VMS's matte varnish, and then we can start to bring the assemblies together. Initially the left hand sidewall is brought into place, then the control column can be slotted into the floor. Then the seat loaded up with Quinta Studio detail seat belts clicks into the floor as well. And now finally, to encapsulate everything, we're going to be bringing in the right hand sidewall. Once this slots into position, that is the tub almost complete. The last thing to add is that beautiful Edward Look instrument panel, and my god does it look good. The instrument panel is secured down using some super glue, and once that is cured, the cockpit is finished. I won't interrupt, but here is a quick showcase for you. The cockpit tub drops into position on the underside of the top half of the fuselage. Bit of a tongue twister there. Flipping it over, I'm now going to continue to build up the back half of the cockpit. Specifically, this is where the radios and other electronic equipment goes. Once again, being detailed with Quinta Studio. Taking a look at the nose wheel bay now, it is very simplistic in its build up, 2 sidewall pieces and then 2 bulkheads which fit on at either end in a slotting mechanism. The wing spar and the nose wheel bay can now be dropped into position, this time being dropped into the lower half of the fuselage. Before I can move on any further, I need to ensure that the nose weight is in place. In this kit there are 3 stainless steel balls which are given to you by Tamiya, and they are integrated into the kit to ensure that the P-38 isn't a tail sitter, which is notorious for these kits. The cockpit and the top half can now be joined to the lower half. The nose-mounted machine guns can be threaded through the nose cone. If I was to do this kit again, I might invest in some aftermarket in this area as they look a little bit one-dimensional. Before the nose cone can be cemented onto the main assembly, the gun bay doors must be cemented into position. Now to build up the wings, the leading edges are a separate part which slots into position. Another external part is the underside exterior portions of the wing, but the lenses will be dropped into position later in the build. On either side of the wing, a wingtip must be installed. Another thing to be installed is going to be the ailerons. These are made up of two pieces, and luckily Tamiya's engineering has ensured that there is not a seam on the trailing edge, which made me very happy. To complete the top surfaces of the wings, the last thing to be installed is the casing for the superchargers. There's one on each side, and Tamiya lets you know by indenting left and right. Now starting to produce the first of two booms on the P-38, starting off by building up the main wheel bay. You might be wondering why so many of these parts have already been primed in Mr. Surfacer 1500 Black. And the reason for this is once they are assembled and all in that wheel bay, it might be quite hard to reach them with the airbrush and get them primed, so priming them at this stage ensures that no bare plastic is remaining on the finished model. Before the wheel well can be cemented inside the boom does need a little bit of work itself. This includes putting some of the gills on the exterior and also some interior parts. As mentioned earlier, this is where Tamiya sneak in another one of those weights. The wheel well is cemented on the interior of the boom, utilising three very secure pins. They are located on both sides, making sure that the wheel well has no movement in it whatsoever. After gluing the boom together, you'll notice that there is a very prominent seam down the spine of it, and don't worry, that is meant to be there, as it is there on the P-38s in real life. Although it does now look like a boom, it is unfortunately far from being completed. I now need to turn my attention to the forward portion and complete the intake. Certain aspects of this assembly caused me some small headaches. In particular, those two cylindrical looking parts. I found that the instructions weren't very clear on the orientation of the parts, so my tip for you is dry fit and dry fit again. With this final portion of the radiator being cemented into position, that completes the chin. It can now be cemented into position on the underside of the boom. Do note that it almost needs to go in at a little bit of an angle, and then it will rocket and fly into position. To now finish off the boom, all that needs to be done is build up the exterior aspects of it. So this includes the oil coolers or the radiators which are on the sides, and also the air scoop mounted just under the wing. With the inlet secure, all I now need to do is repeat that process one more time, and then we have a twin boom aircraft. They now get to be cemented onto the P-38, however the fitment is so good, as you can see, you would get away with leaving them off until the end of the build if you wanted to paint them separately. The glass can now be secured into position. It fits incredibly well. it is very satisfying to see glasswork slot and snap into position so mechanically. This is just a Tamiya masterclass. Once all secured in position using ultra glue, everything can be masked off using Eduard's T-face mask. The Eduard T-face do come with masks for the interior of the canopies, but as I was displaying my P-38 with the canopy closed, I felt there was no need to use them. Zinc chromate can then be used again to spray over the glass and make the framing look that zinc chromate colour. Any seams that were causing me trouble, of which there weren't really very many at all, receive some Mr. Dissolve putty, and then the entire airframe can receive a coating of Mr. Finishing Surfacer 1500 Black. So it's now time to make that lightning shine. So the first base metallic colour which I'm going to use is Super Metallic 201, which is Super Fine Silver 2. Spraying details can be found at the top of your screen. The superfine silver can now be masked off into the separate panels, and we can start to pick them out with several different metallic tones. For this example, I'm going to be using Super Titanium 2. The Superfine Silver 2 was sprayed on in a very uniform coat, however the resulting colours which are going to go on top of it, I'm going to more mottle onto the aircraft to create some tonal variation. Here you can see the lovely variation between the Superfine Silver 2 and the Super Titanium. It really gives this authentic, metallic, bare metal look. I now repeat this process several times with several different colours. I know sometimes it's hard to visualise all of these different colours when you're buying them, so coming up is a small picture which I took and I've done some editing to it, so hopefully you can then see all of the different colours which I have used. Although the P-38 looks absolutely superb in all of its different tones, it does look a little bit flat. So to add another level and also a little bit of historical accuracy, I'm going to put masking tape over some of the panel lines. When certain aspects of the P-38 was being transported around, the ground crew and maintenance would put masking tape over the panel lines. It was called panel sealing tape. This would just ensure when it was in transit, no dirt or grime got into the panels and caused any issues further down the line. This led to a very unique characteristics of having harsh borders around some of the panel lines and dirt and grime throughout. Hopefully this reference image shows a little bit more. It was now time to do some masking and mask off the anti-glare strips. There is a little bit of debate as to whether these would have been olive drab or would they have been black. I personally think olive drab is a far more interesting colour to muck around with, so that's what I went with. Mr. Colour's C12 was the first colour to get sprayed down, and then I can do some post shading with Mr. Colour's C38, which is a darkened olive drab, and also Sky Type S for highlights and really bring the contrast and saturation up another level. Before I started to spray the olive drab, I sponge chipped on some masking fluid onto certain panels along the anti-glare strip. This then meant that once everything had been sprayed and dried, I could rub it off using my finger to reveal some very unique and also authentic looking scratches. You can get similar results using chipping fluid, however masking fluid is just that bit quicker and easier. I had spent a lot of time on the underside creating those really interesting panel sealing lines with the grime. However, when I started to look at the top again, I realised it was looking quite plain and basic. So I once again loaded up smoke grey into the airbrush and then did some very gentle post shading around some of the engine nacelles and also the walkways where the pilot would be getting into the cockpit. The final bit of painting now. My scheme, Little Buckaroo, had a very iconic red nose. I wanted to add some chipping here, so I once again used the masking fluid. The machine guns themselves also had to be painted. I did this using Mystic Colours Iron and also Ammo Mig's Matte Black. With all of the painting now finished, everything could receive a generous coating of Mystic Colours GX100 Gloss. This then seals everything in and protects the paintwork from any chemicals and weathering I'm going to do on top. And if you are unfamiliar, here is the scheme which I'm going to be doing. Little Buckaroo. This was the aircraft of Major Robert Buck Rogers, and in my opinion one of the best pieces of nose art to come out of World War II. Weathering for this one is going to start off with a Black Knight panel line wash. This was applied into all of the panels and then capillary action did the rest. Any excess was wiped off using a clean paper towel. I repeated this process for the anti-glare strips, but this time using a Storm Grey panel line wash. It is almost this murky green colour and it really complements the olive drab well. And here was the final result. I think those two panel washes really helped to break up the metallic aspects and then improve the olive drab. The airframe then received a uniform coat of Mystic Colours GX114, which is a matte varnish. I could then use a red, brown and a buff colour to create some authentic looking staining. And what is going to be creating these stains is going to be the superchargers. So I picked up this Edward Brasson set of a load of little extras for the P-38J. It includes some incredibly nicely detailed tyres and also the superchargers themselves. I painted up the superchargers using that red-brown colour again and then also dry brushing them with a buff oil brusher. This brought out all of those lovely details, but it also made them look sooty and gave them a used appearance. They then slotted into the aircraft without any issues at all. The wheels themselves could be painted up using black and aluminium for the hubs, and then a sandy brown wash could be used to pick out the lovely diamond tread. Utilising the locking pin on the landing gear leg helps to make sure that the flat spot in the tyre is in the correct position. Now putting together one of the two props for this aircraft. Tamiya have quite an ingenious way of making you put it together. 3 parts go around the base of it to create the base of the cone, and then a polycap slips inside this cylindrical part in the middle, and then finally the cone can go on top. It is an incredible way to tackle quite a unique in shape propeller cone. To perform some minor weathering on the propeller, I'm going to be using a metallic watercolour pencil. I can very gently almost dash along the leading edges of the propeller to create some very small scratches and bring an idea of wear into the aircraft. Once weathered and all put together, they can be pressed onto the aircraft. The polycap makes this a really nice easy task and don't have to worry about putting glue anywhere. If you're wondering about why there is a yellow and black prop and then a metallic one, after looking at some reference images, it looks like this prop had been replaced at some point in the Buckaroo's career. I can now flip the P-38 onto its back and then cement the drop tanks into position. Now it's finally time to get this thing standing on its own 2 legs. So the landing gear legs, which were previously assembled, just slot and click into position. No glue needed. The landing gear doors can then also be cemented into position, once again using some tabs. The tabs make this chore really easy and a far more mechanical process rather than it being a fiddly and nerve-wracking task. So now to make the anti-glare strips actually have a purpose, I'm going to mask them off and spray them in a matte varnish. This just helps them to look like they're actually doing what they're meant to do, and also differentiate them from the still quite shiny exterior. The masking tape can now be removed from the canopies to reveal that they've done a superb job in keeping some nice sharp borders between the canopy framing and the glass. With everything removed, the main canopy can now be cemented into position for the final time. Now I'm going to flip it over again, add the crew access ladder, and that pretty much sums this build up. So thank you very much for watching. I really do hope that you've enjoyed this video. I know it's been a bit different to how I usually go about it, so let me know what you think. Anyway, without any further ado, enjoy the final photos and videos, and I'll see you next time guys. Bye bye.